So we want to ask how scientific research and operations can better tackle gender differences in health and what we can expect from new insights and technologies. And we have a great panel to help us unpack the answers to those questions. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jennifer Mieres. Did I say that right? Senior Vice President at the Center for Equity of Care, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Northwell Health Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra, Northwell University in the US. It's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining. And Dr. Enise Lauterbach is Chief Medical Officer at the medical software provider Tuomi IT, a specialist in internal medicine and cardiology. She formerly headed the cardiology department at Trier's Center for Outpatient Rehabilitation. Great to have you here as well. Thank you. And finally, I'm very pleased to introduce Astrid Linder. She's Research Director of Traffic Safety at the Swedish National Road and Transport Research Institute, VTI, and she's also former coordinator of the EU-funded project AdSeat, which created the world's first virtual dummy model of an average female for purposes of analyzing safety in rear impact collisions. Great to have you with us. And as always, we welcome your questions later on, dear ladies and gentlemen, so iPad or live, as you wish. Again, I'd like to ask all of you to start out with sharing your stories, where you see the most glaring evidence of blind spots when it comes to gender disparities in health and safety. And whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's crash test dummies or software, clinical trials, I know there are examples across all of those. So let's just go straight down the panel. Dr. Mieres.
Hello, everyone, and such a pleasure to be here. And again, want to say congratulations to the organizers for such an inspiring conference and summit. So I think, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my personal story. I got interested and devoted to cardiology at age 7 when I lost my grandfather at 7. Went on to study at a liberal arts school for college, and that's important because it brought me back to my creativity later on. But then training in Boston as well as in New York to become a cardiologist recognized that women were not eligible for life-saving strategies. And so my attending professor, a female researcher, said to my whole team, where are the women? Why are the women not in our trials? And why are they not going home when the men are going home? Why are more women dying? And that really sparked my interest in women and heart disease and getting involved to understand the gender disparities. So what we have learned is that women are treated like small men for many years, and we are not small men, that every cell has a sex, and that we needed to really enroll more women in clinical trials and focus to understand what were some of the differences. We have a long way to go, but we're definitely making progress. We lost ground with COVID-19, but definitely need to get more women in clinical trials, but not just for cardiovascular health, because if you think about it, if we know there are differences in the diagnosis and presentation of heart disease for women, think of all of the other diseases. So we coin it the era of the unders. Women are underdiagnosed, undertreated, underrecognized, misdiagnosed, and as a result, more women are dying unnecessarily from a preventable disease.
Just
so a lot of work to go.
Remind us, if you would, and I know that Enise can also speak to this, but let me first ask you, why are we not like small men? What are the differences in presentation, for example, and diagnosis? I mean, obviously I know, but I'm asking in the realm of cardiology.
So, when I was training as a cardiologist, we had the one-size approach to diagnosing and to treating heart disease. And we assume that women coming in with all of the signs, and the classic signs for a heart attack for a man, I should say not classic, the most common presenting signs would be the chest discomfort, and we're talking about coronary artery disease, sort of that, Hollywood heart attack, we call it, pain in the chest. We tested looking for focal areas of blockages and stenosis. We diagnosed and we treated based on that model. But as we have studied over the past 2 decades or more, we have noticed that there's a full spectrum of disease in women. And yes, probably older women may show up with a classic, what we expect, and I have to stop saying classic, but the more traditional symptoms of chest discomfort. But women can have a spectrum of symptoms with nausea, shortness of breath, neck pain, back pain. Importantly, we need to know, and I'll tell you one of the big differences that we found, that while men and women share a lot of the traditional risk factors, so hypertension, smoking, diabetes, elevated cholesterol, we know that things like depression and anxiety affect women differently. Chronic stress definitely has a horrible effect on the vasculature, leading to microvascular disease. So the spectrum for women, you can get the blockages that we see in men, more commonly in men, but also the entire microvascular system is involved, and that can lead to adverse outcomes. Additionally, in the past decade, we have discovered that pregnancy is a stress test for some women, and that women who have had pregnancy-related complications, such as gestational diabetes, hypertension with pregnancy, as well as preeclampsia, eclampsia, or the birth of an early delivery, a small infant for gestational age, that 5 to 15 years later, it places them at risk for heart disease. So clearly a need for a focus on a sex and gender aspect to looking at heart disease, at coronary artery disease.
Very interesting. Then I'm just going to jump over Astrid for now and go over to Enise, because I know that you also have that cardiology background, but you're now in the software area. So maybe you can talk about some of the gender blind spots and disparities in both of those areas, if you care to.
First of all, I agree absolutely, like Jennifer told. That's the facts, that's the truth. And however, at the beginning of my professional years, I was not aware that there could be differences in the treatment and therapy of women and men. And over the years, however, I perceived that men and women show different symptoms, perceptions, and that make a significant difference. The non-recognition of these differences could be fatal for women. As a specialist cardiologist specialized in treatment of cardiac arrhythmias and cardiac insufficiency, heart failure, I regularly saw women who had gone through a medical marathon, an odyssey. There were women with intermittent heart palpitations who only came to see me pure chance. They all had cardiac arrhythmias, but the diagnosis of the referrals were all similar and all had the psych in common. Women with cardiac neurosis, hysterias, panic attacks, many of them had at least one consultation with a psychiatrist or other doctor, house doctor. Some of them were repeatedly hospitalized. Almost all were taking psychotropic medications. Some of these women had been suffering for decades. Many of these female patients could be treated well, often even curatively, because they all had cardiac arrhythmias that needed treatment. These women were often seen by male colleagues, and you will ask me now, intuitively, you did everything right? Yes. I think we women, we female doctors, intuitively has the right decisions, but this is not a chance. This changes when there is at least one woman at the operating table. There are recent searchings. They all can save female patients.
So simply the perspective of a female practitioner is already changing outcomes.
Yeah,
Huh.
that's right.
Interesting. Just because we were talking about it earlier, I don't know if this is something you can speak to, but you are now, of course, at a software provider. What about unconscious bias in medical data sets, in health data sets? Take your mic, if you would, please.
It's the most important thing is to develop software to know these biases and the perceptions of female. In our daily treatment, as a female doctor, I know this, and most common software developer don't know about these issues. When I develop a software, we include this. We differ between the gender because the perception of the both are different, but not only the perceptions, not the only subjective things, the objective things too, like blood pressure, heart rates. This is so important. So we include this, and the most software companies, not the software companies, the developer, aren't aware about this.
Thank you. Now let me go to Astrid, if I may, and switch tracks a little. We're staying with gender disparities, but vehicle safety, crash tests. Tell us about this model you developed, and why was that important?
Yeah, I'll start with where I got into this area, and I was a PhD student at Chalmers University, and now we are back in the late 90s. And in a big project that was already up and running when I started, we developed the world's first crash test dummy for low severity re-impacts. And this was done for addressing soft tissue neck injuries, often called whiplash injuries. So it is an impact scenario. It's low severities where we still don't have any regulatory tests, but we do have nowadays tests with in consumer information programs. However, when I was a PhD student, I then did a literature review which showed that women were very much less well protected than men, and that we have known this since the late 1960s onwards. And we were in this project where I was a PhD student. We were developing a model of an average male, because this is what we use in the area, and still average male. And so after having developed this model, which is sold, it's called BioRid, you can buy it from Humanetics, then I thought a logical next step would be to have the part of the population that were then and is still excluded when it comes to assessment of safety, which is the female part of the population. That part of the population should also be present when we assess the protection. And yeah, since then I've been working on this topic and doing other things in road safety as well, of course, also. And 10 years ago, we had this model developed in a project, a virtual model of an average female, to show that the data is available. Because what I heard very often was, oh, but you know, we don't know how to do it, the data is not there, it's so difficult, it's so expensive. So we did it in a project and to show it was there. And then it's, it didn't really take off. Nothing really much happened in the world. So we took some new steps and had some funding in Sweden, and then moved on to another EU-funded project where we now have also made a physical model of an average male and an average female to be used for low severity re-impacts, to both show that it can be done, and it should be done, and it should be used. So that's the journey, and that's where we are today.
Clearly, something's changing in awareness. If for 30 years nobody's really paying attention to this project or to this discrepancy, and then you present a crash test dummy that actually shows the results, and yet still people don't entirely pick up on it. What has changed since then? What has changed, let's say, in the last 20 to 25 years? Are you seeing rising awareness?
No, yeah, rising awareness. We are talking about it now, but the regulatory tests are still the same. It requires you to use a model of an average male, full stop. So even if you, as a very ambitious car manufacturer, would do a model of an average female and you would put it into your test and you would show the results, the regulators would say, we don't look at things that are not specified in the regulation.
Are you able to assess the socioeconomic impact of that? I mean, it must be measured in lives lost of women that could have been saved.
Yeah, and in overall safety, yeah, you know, from the conference in Stockholm a couple of years ago, where you moderated fantastically, and we still have these terrible figures: 1.3 million people every year dying on our roads, and many times more seriously injured. And in addition, we have what we are classified as minor injuries in terms of risk of death, but which can have long-term consequences on your health.
Astrid, I have to ask you one more question before I widen the discussion, because I do want to talk about awareness with Enise and with you, Dr. Mieres, as well. But would it change if the transport sector weren't as male-dominated as it was? Because Enise told us that the presence of women in an operating room can change the outcome.
That is not my understanding, because we, at least from Sweden, we are many females in this area and many leading in leading positions. So it's not. That is not the reason today that the legislation is as it is.
What's your reason? What do you think it is?
Yeah, it's a bit of a conservative
status quoism.
Yeah, I think we are sometimes a bit afraid of changes. We don't see it as a possibility as a community. We see, oh, we know what we have, and oh, we might lose something here. So
clearly, the automobile industry might not be eager to make the change,
no, but
theoretically,
they benefit
regulators
also from us being safer. And some car manufacturers really take the lead here and say that nobody should die by or in a specific car. Mm-hmm. So they are there.
So Jennifer, how about in your field? That's not terribly encouraging, what we just heard from Astrid. Would you say there's rising awareness now within the area of cardiology about this discrepancy and what it means?
Yes, definitely. And I think what has happened, we have taken, and there have been a network of women, and we've enlisted some men, a sort of four-pronged approach to this. One, awareness, and aligning with partnerships with the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women movement. We got people from the media. We partnered with the media because we learned that women get their health information not from the healthcare professional teams, but from the media. So we established a partnership with the media and built a whole coalition of accurate scientific education to get to women. We also then partnered with researchers to truly educate and empower women, but also to change the medical guidelines. So now, and I have been, had the privilege of chairing the committee that changed the guidelines of how we image women to look for heart disease. I mean, it took time and effort, but a multidisciplinary approach led to that. Also advocacy. We partnered in the United States with senators and the entire Congress to really, and one, many of our legislators who were women really got behind us to change some of the laws to access. We partnered with industry for funding for research guidelines, and it has taken 20 years, but now you cannot get a research grant coming from the government without having a sex and gender aspect and committing to enrolling women. And then finally, we sort of partnered with women so that their voices could be heard and started doing storytelling, producing documentaries, and getting women to really share their stories, to become engaged and empowered, because we know that 80% of heart disease, of all kinds of diseases, can be prevented with empowerment as well as understanding what's going on. So we really changed the paradigm. We still have a lot of work to do because we lost ground with COVID, to empowering women to be partners in their heart health.
Now that's a perspective from the U.S. Enise, would you say it's similar here as well? Are you seeing rising awareness and also changes in processes?
About awareness, yes, we see a grow. Absolutely right. We have the same guidelines, the AHA, the American Heart Association, and the European Society of Cardiology, Deutsche Gesellschaft für Kardiologie. We depend to both societies. We try to change. It's not easy, but it's working from us female cardiologists. And yes, I have another point. We have to discuss why we see or saw this growth. The reason is probably the increasing of the feminization of medicine in the health sector. Female doctors are treated like the guidelines show us more than male colleagues. And we are aware of this gender aspects. So for us, it's much more easier to treat like this. And we are more communicative, and it's all about eyeline. We are in a partnership with our patients, and I think this is the difference.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What about new technologies in any of these areas, whether it's cardiology, and medicine, or in fact transport and gender? Do you see new technologies potentially making a difference here? One thing that I'm aware of is the increasing emphasis in clinical trials to also do decentralized trials in the hope that we can get a broader base of patients. So Enise, Jennifer, whether you maybe have some thoughts on that?
It's true. New technologies can play an important role in overcoming gender inequalities. For example, by advancing personalized medicine through the use of big data. We have data, but we are not enabled to detect or analyze it because we ignore the gender issue. As such, not only can targeted treatments be developed that are tailored to individual needs, but also take gender differences into account. The important things is wearables such as fitness trackers, smart watches, as well as digital healthcare apps that collect and analyze patients' health data can contribute to identifying gender differences in healthcare. I think this is the big difference and the big chance for us now. And the other thing is there is a need, however, to adopt gender-responsive and inclusive approaches to the development and applications of technologies to ensure that they do not lead to new inequalities. This is the matter and our sorrows.
You know, I would say since we've studied sex and gender medicine, we have refined our technologies such as cardiac MRI to really interrogate and to look at the microvasculature, because microvascular disease much more common in women. And definitely, as Enise said, the smartwatch, I mean, Apple has been ahead of the game in giving us really important information to understand not only arrhythmias, but also we know that exercise or activity is one key methodology for preventing and optimizing risk factors for heart disease. And so we know from gathering the data from the women, from our Research Goes Red, which is the Go Red for Women research component, that women using even a Fitbit or their Apple Watch or other device are now exercising more. We have preliminary data to show better control of hypertension and diabetes. And we also know that women that are empowered with keeping a log of their activities on their heart health numbers, are empowered to speak to their doctors about getting tested or screened for heart disease or risk assessed. So I think digital technology has definitely empowered women to be partners in their health, but also the data has definitely pushed the medical community, the pharmaceutical community, device community to change how we image women to get more information to understand the full spectrum of ischemic heart disease in women.
Thank you. Astrid, what about in the transport sector? New technologies possibly breaking through what you described in terms of disparities?
Yeah, we also have this development in the transport area, and I'm talking now in particular about vehicle safety, for more personalized protection, being able to identify who is in the seat and adapt restraint systems and so on prior to a crash and so on. So that is one end of the spectrum, and there are very many ambitious car manufacturers putting a lot of effort into that. But when it comes to if it will influence how we assess safety, I sometimes get the question, so when will this happen? And the simple answer to that is soon or never. It depends on if we decide to do it.
Yeah. A question of will.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I have audience questions pouring in here, so I'm going to leave my part of it now and go straight to the ones that are on the app, and then hopefully we can take a few from the room as well. First question, what education outreach programs work best to convince untrusting, historically underrepresented groups to join clinical trials? Jennifer?
So I think I come back to this power of storytelling. And so, looking at what the American Heart Association and Women Heart, which is a group founded by women for women to prevent heart disease, we have definitely customized the stories. And we have used actually the Mayo Clinic to train women who have survived heart disease, and that number is growing now, to become ambassadors and share their stories. So we're partnering with the media industry and journalists where women are on television or on videos or online telling their stories, and truly there's strength in numbers. And so you see someone that looks like you definitely are empowered or become engaged to do what they have done and to follow the guidelines. So I think it's customization of care, and then the same for clinical trials, women talking about trials and the importance, but with a culturally customized, language preferred a way of doing it, because across the globe, we speak many languages, so it's important to get the customization and the cultural aspects included in sort of the storytelling model.
And I have two related questions to that. I want to try to fuse them also to you, Jennifer. The first one is this. Black women are routinely prescribed less pain medication than white women due to bias. Black communities live longer if their community has a black physician. How do we use AI to act as a mirror to teach physicians about their own biases, and who is doing this now? Which med schools are doing this also?
Great question, and it comes back to the theme of today's sessions, right, about teaching empathy. And so there are a few med schools, including ours, on the cutting edge, using virtual reality and to really train our physicians of the future to really understand that in this sort of concept of a partnership that we have biases and how to mitigate bias. So it's an ongoing process. It is still in its infancy, I think, because the new generation, and there's a generational divide, the younger generation definitely understand it. They sort of are integrated. The bulk of the baby boomers and sort of that mid-generation, we have to retrain them, and there's a little bit of resistance. But definitely virtual reality is absolutely helping. The Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, our medical school, which is the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra, Northwell, has a whole new curriculum, and we're integrating virtual reality to get to empathy and to build that partnership with our patients. And definitely the whole theory of Black patients, highest burden of heart disease, definitely discriminated against. We're hoping that, hopefully in my lifetime, we will solve for that.
Thank you. Let me go over to Enise. Question for you. Would you say that women's mistreatment or undertreatment for cardio diseases is caused by the antidepressant therapies that they are being given, or not discovered diseases that are essentially not recognized and therefore wrongly diagnosed? Sorry, take your mic, please.
It's clearly wrongly diagnosed. The patients I saw has palpitations and arrhythmias, and not discovering leads to a depression. That's an important thing to know about this. You have 10, 15, 20 years, palpitations, arrhythmias, your heart rate's about 150, and you are in panic, you are in fear, and this is lead to depression, not the other way.
Very interesting. Thank you. And then, Astrid, for you, when you are saying that women are more in danger in accidents because not properly tested, what about the impact on children?
Yes, fortunately we have worked on protecting our children for many decades, and there we have a big range of dummies in different ages, 6 months, 1.5 years, 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, and then we have also a small female that is equivalent of a 12-year-old. So we have that range, and there is a lot of effort put into different type of restraints for different ages and so on. So that is an area where we have felt the urgent need to address the safety of children, and we have done that. So that shows very clearly that we can do it if we want to.
And then another one, I assume that this was directed to you. Do you also partner with the Karolinska in Sweden, who are doing gender medicine research as well, and have started with the Janus project on having a database on substances and whether there are gender differences? But she may be thinking of one of the doctors, whoever posed this. Is that right? Did you mean it to go to the doctors?
So I would say yes. So I would also say, to add to what Enise said, the US, the European Society, and the World Heart Federation have definitely have partnered to solve and to integrate the sex and gender aspects to all of cardiovascular disease. And yes, the Karolinska Institute is definitely a partner, not only in the US, but with the European Society as well, to try to solve some of the sex and gender issues.
Okay, thank you very much also for figuring out who that was intended for. And lastly, this one again, I think for you, Jennifer, essentially 2 questions also picking up on the clinical trials issues. What education outreach programs work best to convince historically underrepresented groups that may be mistrustful that they should join clinical trials? And in the US, one of the key reasons that historically underrepresented groups reference is infamous experiments like the Tuskegee trials. This is a famous medical trial that was conducted over many, many years on Black patients who were not told that they weren't actually getting the medicines that they thought they were getting. Is there a role for using technology like synthetically generated data to address disparate impact?
So, complicated question. And yes, the Tuskegee trial led to a lot of mistrust. And now I would say in the era of healthcare redesign, we realize that partnerships with communities and with patients, as well as increasing the workforce for Black physicians to doing STEM, I know it's STEAM, but having more physicians trained and healthcare professionals who come from underrepresented groups will definitely build trust. So it's an ongoing movement, also using virtual reality, truly an important piece, and doing outreach into the communities, like the barbershop methodology, where Black men go for haircuts, having the barbers trained as community workers to really talk about hypertension, and we're beginning to see some positive results.
Wow, great. We could maybe do one more from the audience, if you're quick. Okay.
No, honestly, the American approach is very inspiring for us. Especially in Germany, we see, since women mostly are the key players in their families, they rather focus on the needs of the kids or the husband, so they would come too late to the doctor, which is like the gatekeeper model in terms of the house arts or general practitioner. So having that pain in the chest or in the backside, after days they would go to the doctor, unless they died already, and the practitioner usually has expected a man coming with those symptoms would ask, what did you do? Did you do yoga, so you have a gymnastic problem here, or did you clean your windows? So basically he is more thinking of having an orthopedic problem in front of him rather than a really fast to be solved myocardial infarction coming. And then he would again lose time to send him over to a cardiologist. So we're losing those, especially younger women since 2013 in Germany, we're losing them, they're dying before they get the medication. And therefore I love the American approach to give more information via using the media, as well as to up-train our gatekeepers, to make access more easily and to increase the awareness. And I wonder if you would work together with the German Heart Association. As you probably mentioned already, it would be so fastly to give information.
So I think, Enise probably will answer this one, but I think there's an ongoing movement. But I also want to say, I just want to say one thing, that women need to recognize your health is your most important asset. And just like you're taking care of your kids and everyone else, you've got to take care of your health, and it has to be on your dashboard as number one. Because without health, you have nothing, right? So.
Yeah. The movement Go Red from the American Heart Association is a big role model for us. The issue is, in the last 10 years, our Gesellschaft for Deutsche Gesellschaft für Kardiologie has another view about this issue. And this year, in January, we start, in the first time, with the AHA, the German version for Go Red. And we talk with a lot of people, especially with politicians, because we need social awareness with all of us. I think it's a start, a little start. We work for progress.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. Any other question in the room? Yeah.
Maybe for Jennifer, do you guys have in your area any experience with how to manage our parents' health with iWatches? How can we do that effectively?
Oh my goodness. I would say this. What we have just started some small projects at like senior living facilities or assisted living facilities where we have younger people going in to teach them how to use the iWatch, their iPhones, and how to use the watch. But baby steps, but it is a brilliant idea because you come back to 80% can be prevented with knowledge, with early treatment. Yes, we are working on it. Small steps.
Everyone's getting that for Christmas.
Thank you very much. I think we'll leave it there. Many, many thanks to all three of you. This was very interesting indeed.